Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. Here with one of my favorite master coaches, Amy Schwartz. How are you, Amy?
I'm great, Glenn. How are you?
I'm good. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did.
You know, that was my great-grandmother's last name, too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my goal is to have you learn one new thing about me every time we talk.
What was your great-grandmother's first name?
Lena.
Lena Schwartz. Okay.
It might be my great-great-grandmother who had Schwartz. Anyway, Amy, you had an insight. You're framing things in a particular way with clients that I thought was different and interesting. And it had to do with being alert to the fact that our food monsters get us to binge in two ways. One is by suggesting that we overindulge, but another is by suggesting that we become too restrictive. And you've been framing things in a way with clients that helps them to see both facets of the food monster. And I was hoping you could tell the story of how that came about and what you've been doing.
Okay. And do you want me to call it the food monster? Because all my notes say overeating pig and restrictive pig.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, how it came about was I used to think that fat people, and including myself, had an overeating pig. And then a small number of people, maybe people with eating disorders, had restrictive pigs. And I couldn't understand it. And I also sometimes found myself wishing, I wish I had a restrictive pig so I could lose all that weight. But as I've been coaching and also noticing my own motivations and behaviors, I've started to realize that almost everyone and 100% of people who've ever been on a diet to lose weight has a restrictive pig.
I would agree.
We all have overeating pigs. Those of us who are overweight, and anyone whose diet has a restrictive pig, and they both contribute to problems with becoming a quote unquote normal eater. Some people have worse restrictive pigs than others. In the extreme, even though if you have let's say a normal restrictive pig wants you to restrict so that eventually you'll binge. But a malignant restrictive pig actually wants to kill you. So it's worth watching out for that.
In the case of anorexia.
Well, in the case of anorexia, yeah, but there's kind of a shadow of that in everyone. So like in our culture that says the thinner you are, the better, that if your bones show through, that's attractive.
You can't be too rich or too thin.
You can never be too thin, too rich or too thin. As an example, I have a 14-year-old cat. She's stopped eating. Skin and bones, and I've been bringing her to the vet and trying to give her shots so I can get her to eat and all this stuff. And my ex-husband says, she looks so fashionable. She's a beautiful cat, and to me, she's emaciated. She's about to die.
Wow. The culture has a really warped sense of body image.
Yeah, the culture does. And then I also find that people who were fatter as children and who got teased or humiliated by their friends or family, they tend to have, whether consciously or unconsciously, stricter restrictive pigs. And they will say things like, I want to be skinny, or they think skinny is a compliment. Anyway, like I've talked to you about saying fit instead of thin.
You got me to change the tagline for the old book.
Right.
Where to be a permanently healthy person rather than a permanently thin person.
Right. And thin isn't as bad as skinny, but it's along those lines, and it's giving too much power, in my opinion, to the restrictive pig.
Okay. I don't disagree.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you or for our listeners, some clues to suss out the restrictive pig. There's probably a better word than that. But the restrictive pig can be really sneaky. I find that a lot of times people in our program, other places too, probably, they mistake the restrictive pig for their higher self. And part of that's probably from dieting. And so when they want to go on a, let's say, a strict diet, or they want to be on a big calorie deficit, or there's some other words that when you hear them are going to be clues to the restrictive pig.
To help you detect.
Right.
Yeah.
To detect the restrictive pig, or even like a rule, if you're going to make a food rule, and is your restrictive pig making this rule, or is it really your higher self? Like eating clean. When people say eating clean, that's a warning sign, because you're saying, I never will eat anything that isn't 100% healthy or that won't help me lose weight, is usually what eating clean means. I mean, not always. I'm sure there's some people who are healthitarians, but for our average reader or listener, if you're trying to eat clean, it really means you're trying to go on a diet and lose weight.
That phrase actually comes out of the bodybuilding world, where
That's right. And bodybuilders probably have eating disorders and restrictive pigs.
which is not to say you can't have a set of rules that prevent you from having processed food, but it's just a clue that your restricted pig might be at work. You need to consider it more thoroughly. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right. And the exercise I have my clients do, and I can show you this if you want, or I can just describe it. I have them make a chart. I have my own that I made for myself as an illustration. For a particular situation or rule, what would the overeating pig want? What would the restrictive pig say? And then what should your higher self say? And as sort of a shorthand for the higher self, I call it the 80-20. Because we're also combating perfectionism here, where a person says, I must eat 100% health. Like you yourself went through, at one point you were going to eat 100% raw foods. And then you decided that may not be a sustainable lifestyle. So you went to 60-40 or 80-20.
Let me try to articulate what I think you're saying.
Okay.
I think you're saying that there's a level of perfectionism that some people bring to the food plan where they feel like they have to aim for the most perfect healthy target that they can. And in my case, that would have been eating 100% raw 100% of the time. And most people who are able to sustain the changes that we affect long term, they're usually not doing it by aiming at the absolute most perfect healthy target. Not everybody agrees what that is. That's what I thought the healthiest target was. Some people would say it was eating nothing but meat and vegetables. But most people are not able to sustain that level of restriction. And so you're suggesting that you can ask yourself, well, if you still have this belief that that would be the perfect way to eat, what would be the 80-20 of it? So for me, it's to allow, 30 or 40% of my calories to come from cooked vegetables or tofu or beans or something like that. For other people, it might be I eat pretty darn low carb, but I allow myself 50 carbs a day or something like that. Is that what you're saying? The 80-20 of it?
Well, it's partly, yeah, I'm saying that, but in this case, we're discussing what's the most healthy diet to eat. But usually when people say healthy diet, they really mean what diet can I follow so I lose the most weight?
As quickly as I can.
Yeah. And that certain foods have gotten demonized because they might put on weight, like fat or carbs. So if someone says, I try to never eat fat or I never eat starchy carbs, that's a restricted pig.
Interesting. Could be. Could very well be.
At least it's a sign to look out for that.
Gotcha.
And it's generally going to be something that's not sustainable, which is the more practical part of it.
The elimination of an entire macronutrient group is probably not sustainable. It's probably part of your restrictive pig. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. In the end, it's focused mostly on weight loss, whether that's stated or not.
Got it. So it's done hypothetically in the name of health, but it really is driven by the desire to lose weight quickly.
Oh, right. And even in our culture where, you're not supposed to say diet. So now you don't hear about diets anymore. You hear about healthy lifestyle, right? That kind of thing. Healthy lifestyle, clean eating. So shall I give you a few examples?
Please.
Okay. I'll use my own examples. One of my binge problems used to be eating while reading on the couch.
I remember that well.
Oh, yeah, there's still echoes of that in my body and brain, whatever. The overeating pig says, eat mindlessly on the couch while reading. Choose foods you can eat endlessly without looking, like trail mix, pistachio nuts, and M&M peanuts.
Okay.
Right? So then the restrictive pig says, always pay full attention to your food, no distractions. Eat at a table. You can't read, you can't talk, you can't listen to music,
Oh, I see where you're going
you
with it.
can't read a newspaper.
How did you find a balance between those two?
And the balance, the higher self version is you can eat while reading at the table as long as it's a predefined portion.
Okay. Okay. Now I really get what you're saying. That's great. That's a significant addition to our understanding. So what you're saying is that there are probably going to be three versions of any rule you could construct.
Yes, yes. The restrictive one is going to be temporary because in the back of your mind, it's always going to be, I'll keep this rule until I lose all the weight. And then I can go back to something I would prefer and enjoy.
And you would advise people to find the balanced rule as soon as they can.
Oh, and the other thing I say, it's related to this, is don't think about what rule is going to help me lose weight. Think about what rule is going to stop me from overeating.
What rule is going to make it possible for me to stop binging and nourish myself in the long run?
Yes, without overeating. And then, you identify the overeating behaviors. Because I know I did, and I'm sure lots of people do. I would go on diets, but I'd still be binging or I'd still be overeating, but I'd be counting the calories. You can binge on 900 calories a day, amazingly. So,
Yes. When I was strictly counting calories 20 years ago as an effort to stop, I could count to 2,200 in all sorts of ways, including 2,200 calories of marshmallows.
and you can lose weight that way too.
Yes, you make yourself really sick, but you can.
Right. Who's that guy? I can't remember who did
The supersize me guy?
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
You're just eating McDonald's or whatever. Yeah.
you could do that. This is really interesting, Amy. Do you have other examples?
Oh, yeah, I have like 6 or 7.
Let's do it.
All right, here's one. Buffets and family dinners. So the overeating pig says, eat as much as you want of everything. Find a place with steamship round and those little French bread or sourdough rolls. They put them on and you can have as many as you want. And they have desserts too, but first focus on the expensive foods and then eat as many desserts as you want.
You have a very interesting pig. And what does the restrictive pig
The
say?
restrictive pig says, just have a small taste of everything and then one entree, one side dish, and no dessert.
Mhm. And the higher self says,
Higher self says, taste what you think you will like, then have one full portion of your favorite and one dessert if it's on your preferred dessert list, which is a list of desserts I have that I think are worth the calories.
this is very well thought out. I'm very impressed. Would you keep
Sure.
going?
Yeah, let me keep going. All right, so this is a section I call refrigerator and pantry. I don't have an entry for the overeating pig, but probably it should be buy anything you want and keep your refrigerator and freezer stocked with binge foods at all times.
Gotcha.
The restrictive pig says, don't keep food on hand in the house. You can't be trusted not to eat it all. Let me just say as an aside, not knowing that I had a restrictive pig, I used to think I couldn't keep food in the house. I had an empty refrigerator. I have to go out every single day to buy food. Anyway, the higher self has now realized you can keep bread, butter, fruit, even chocolate and desserts in the house because you are not restricted. You can eat them anytime if they're on your list and don't break any rules.
I see. That works for you. It might not work for other people, but the point is that it's the 80-20 of it. I can sense a great feeling of relief when you come to the balanced version.
Yes, right. Because the overeating one, there's no controls. The restrictive ones is, I have to do this for the rest of my life. Oh no. And the higher self is, yeah, I could do this. I could do this.
Yes, it's sustainable. The restrictive and indulgent pigs ideas are not sustainable. They lead to disaster.
All right, here's the one on sugary drinks. The overeating pig says lemonade, chai lattes, mocktails, alcoholic drinks that are primarily sweet, go for it. The restrictive pig says, don't even put 1 teaspoon of sugar in your coffee ever because you can't handle it. Higher self says, you can have a malted milkshake because it's on your preferred dessert list and a teaspoon of sugar in any drink. But otherwise, no sugary drinks, and no alcohol in restaurants.
This is wonderful. Could we talk about the process of getting there? I think I understand your diagnostic tests to detect the restrictive pig, and the overeating pig is one that most people can find. But my experience with clients is they vacillate back and forth. And I guess I kind of naturally help them identify something in the middle without knowing that's what I was doing. But do you have a better thought out process for getting to the higher self version?
Well, you first have to know what the overeating pig and the restricted pig want to do. And then you automatically know it's got to be somewhere in between.
I see. So when you're trying to find your way out of the forest, you figure out which way not to go.
Yeah,
You-
you first have to do that. And because the other reason is the first rule people will usually make is going to be a restrictive pig rule. I will never again have sugar and flour. Okay, now maybe that's a valid decision. Maybe you got the food addiction and all the bright line eaters in the world and all that. But that's your very first rule. That's probably your restrictive pig.
Gotcha. I'm thinking about you won this game like a tortoise, right? Like you used to feel like you were behind everybody else.
Yeah.
And now we look at your eating and your sustainability and you feel like you're ahead of everybody else. I would validate that. I don't think you're being grandiose. I think that you have really found a very settled way of eating with, occasional troubles like everybody else.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm ahead of everyone else. I'm just ahead of people who haven't gotten it yet. There are people who still get it faster than I do.
How do you help people get it faster? So part of getting it faster is having this framework and identifying both the restrictive and the overindulgent pig. Is there anything else you do to help them to get there faster?
Well, there is something, and you do it too, if they make a restrictive rule, whether they're calling it that or not, when you get the pig squeals, sometimes you'll help them craft a softer rule, right? Because they'll say, well, my rule is I never again have dessert. And then the pig will say, yeah, but what about on my birthday or Christmas or Easter? And then you'll say, well, would you like to make a conditional rule for holidays or
Yes,
birthdays?
I do that. I do. Yes, because I could, if I were going to strictly follow the refutation process, say STFU, Mr. Pig, who cares
Right,
about holidays and weekends? And I
right,
could do that, but my judgment is that the rule might be too restrictive for them. And so I aim towards a softer rule. That's a good
right.
point.
So you automatically do that. And so you just help people do that.
Very good. And I'd say, unless you're totally out of control and you find you really can't deal with a softer rule, most people, in my experience, at least most people working our program, they do better with softer rules up front. Maybe you can tighten it up later. There's the occasional person, I always say it's like 1 out of 3. The truth is, I don't have a statistically reliable and valid study on that. It's just my general sense of things over the 2,000 people we've seen. But some people really do need the restrictive rule. I will never have chocolate again. I will never eat processed sugar again. At least with 2 out of 3 people, I find that even if that's where they're headed, that stair stepping them gets them there faster than trying to do it all at once.
Well, there's another thing you do that's sort of in that direction, although it's not exactly the same. But if someone is thinking about a sugar flour rule or processed food or whatever, but they're afraid to commit to it forever, is you tell them to do an experiment.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you say this, but I say this is don't decide now, because part of it is that your brain is influenced by the presence of the processed food in your brain. So let's clean it out. And then when you have a clean brain, then you can decide what role you want those foods to play in your life.
It's funny. I used to say that and it kind of slipped out of my vocabulary a couple of years ago. I actually rebroadcast an old interview that I did with a guy who was successful in just that way. He said, you can decide not to decide for now and just do a 30-day experiment. And people think much more clearly at the end of that about what they really want.
And
Right?
you can change your mind at any time.
Hmm.
I use that don't decide now for a lot of situations. So, as an aside, if I'm trying to talk somebody into something and they seem to be not wanting to do it, so I'll tell them, don't decide now. I'll bring it up again next time. Just think about it until then.
That's really smart. Okay. So do you have more examples or
Yeah,
someplace
I
else?
do. I have 3 more examples. There's probably more, but that's as much as I got.
Okay.
Free food and samples. So the overeating pig always says, take as much as you want, keep going back for more until it's all gone. You deserve it, and it's free. The restrictive pig says, don't eat between meals at all. Don't eat samples at grocery stores or free food at work. You don't need it. And the higher self says, I prefer to eat just one portion and savor it instead of always jumping ahead to how much I can get without enjoying what I have right now.
I love it.
Nuts and seeds. Overeating pig, they're healthy. Have as much as you want. A restrictive pig, you can't control them, so don't eat them at all. And this one is another don't decide now one. So my higher self says, consider a rule or a secret guideline that says I never eat nuts alone, or I only eat them as a condiment.
There you go.
And then my after dinner rule, the overeating pig is always saying almost every night, why should you restrict what you eat after dinner? You've been maintaining your weight, so why not? And you enjoy it, so go for it. And the restrictive pig says you should be able to skip dessert, chocolate, and sweets altogether. There is no nutritional requirement for these foods. And the higher self at the moment says, I can always eat chocolates and desserts that are on my preferred dessert list. I would rather not eat after dinner, because usually that means eating on the couch while reading, which is a habit I want to extinguish. While eating 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of chocolate is not exactly mindless eating while reading, it shows a lack of control. I would prefer to have a hard stop after dinner with or without a dessert eaten at the table. Nighttime eating will prevent me from identifying my authentic needs.
Wow. I'm very impressed, Mrs. Schwartz. Miss Schwartz, Dr. Schwartz. I'm very impressed. Ms. Schwartz. What should I call you? I'm in
You can
trouble.
call me Amy.
I would just call you Amy. I'm in trouble now.
Which reminds me, I can now tell you the joke from Laughing.
Please.
Okay, so there's 2 people sitting on a bench waiting for a bus. And I think one of them is the church lady. I think it was Gilda Radner.
Yeah.
And she's holding a pocketbook, like one of these things that she holds in 2 hands, handbag. And the old man, this dirty old man sitting next to her, turns and says, want to call me sweetie? And she turns around and hits him in the head with a pocketbook. And then he says, want to call me honey? And then she hits him again. And then finally he says, want to call me an ambulance?
That's funny. I liked laughing. It's old-fashioned humor, but I really liked it. I remember watching that as a kid. Okay, is there anything I should have asked you about this or that you wanted to say that you didn't have a chance to share?
Oh, I did want to say something else about the danger of the extreme restrictive pig. Because you have heard people, or at least I've heard people, and I've been reading memoirs of people lately who say, I'd rather die than be fat. And I kind of think they mean it literally.
Yeah, part of recovering is to learning to love yourself anyway, at any weight, learning to love yourself before you've arrived. There's a hidden facet of that psychology, which is part of the diet mentality, which says I'm not lovable if I'm even 5 pounds above my ideal weight. But I mean, if you think about it, people are lovable at 100 pounds above their ideal weight, right?
Right, of course. Yes.
When people are restricting, they have a sense of superiority. There's like a little bit of a manic high and a sense of superiority. Like they feel like it's a superpower how little they can eat, and it makes them feel better than other people. They won't always be able to acknowledge that, but you can sense it.
That's in the extreme. But
Yeah,
in the borderline versions that I'm talking about here, that we want everyone to be aware of, there are other things that are much less extreme, like people who say, I enjoy feeling in control.
yeah.
That's a moderate version of the restrictive pig.
But the bottom line is that your solution is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. Your solution is probably going to be in something much more sustainable and reasonable that still gives you protection from overindulgence and binging.
Yeah, and that's in the rules. I find though a lot of our clients will, or at least some of our clients, 2 at least I know of, will make secret rules on the fly. And even though we tell them, oh, don't let your pig talk you into eating foods by impulse, some people will actually restrict on impulse.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't have a rule about sugar or flour, but I'm not going to have any desserts over the holidays. It's not a rule. I just decided just now as I walked into or I have a rule that I could eat anything I want at a social event, but this time I'm not going to. I'm just going to have water and a dry cracker.
It's interesting. And you think that's a bad idea? You think that could be restrictive?
Well, it is because it's not a rule. They're making a restrictive rule on the fly. And I used to think it's okay to make a more restrictive rule on the fly, but now I don't think so. Because I think impulsive restricting is just as bad as impulsive overeating.
Interesting. Interesting. So you would argue for thinking it out a couple of days beforehand and figuring out what you want to do over the holidays with desserts. You're not saying everybody has to have desserts over the holidays,
Oh,
right?
no, I just use that as an example. But whatever in the moment you decide to restrict something, I wouldn't do it.
It's not sitting right with me for some reason. Okay, so here's what is sitting right with me. What is sitting right with me is that impulsive decisions about important food triggers almost always favor the pig. So whether it's restrictive or overindulgent.
Yes, right, right.
So I definitely agree.
I'm not saying don't ever decide to not eat a dessert or something that's rich or savory. But if it comes out as like a rule of the moment, rather than I just don't want to, or I decide right now that I'm not going to eat that, that's different from saying, I think I'd better have a rule that I don't do this.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Can I think about that and maybe we can talk about it a little more? I
Yeah.
think I agree with you, but I feel like there's something else there that I want to.
May not have expressed it right, and I'll think I can think more about that too.
I just don't want people to feel like they have to have dessert.
No, you never have to, but you also don't have to not have it.
That's true. What you're saying is that it's possible to impulsively make restrictive rules without realizing it.
Right. If it's on your plan, you can have it or you cannot have it. But if you make a rule to not have it or a secret rule, and people will admit they have secret rules.
I know.
So if you make a secret rule to restrict something, then it should probably be in writing and just the same as an indulgent rule.
And the reason for that is because it forces it through your intellectual processing
Right.
and it makes you less vulnerable to whims and impulses.
Yeah, and often the next day it'll be, well, I ate more at breakfast because, or I ate more at lunch, or I ate more at dinner because, I was at that party and I impulsively decided to not have X, Y, and Z.
Or to skip a meal or something like that.
Or
Yeah,
someone the other day said I was with friends and I don't have a rule about processed food, but I said no, and then I got home and I overate on X, Y, Z.
I see where you're going with it. Okay. Okay. Very interesting. This is fascinating, Amy. I really respect your brain. You've put a lot of thought into this over the years. You made some very serious contributions. I really respect them. Is there anything else that I should have asked you or that you wanted to say?
Well, I have a whole nother topic for another time.
Okay.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.